And you're in southern Tennessee. It's summer, it's hot, it's humid. How has summer production of these greens been for you? Do you face challenges at all?
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge. Last summer was definitely rough. It was a really hot summer. The summer's been, it's definitely been hot and humid. It really started about 2 weeks ago. And we noticed about 2 weeks ago a drastic decline in the quality of especially the Saladova. For sure. And we're definitely quickly getting our overhead irrigation on. We're going to begin our shade cloth setup this week just because we just realized it just overnight almost just turned really hot and really humid. And it's game on summer green time.
When you say diminishing quality, is it appearance? Is it taste? Is it growth rate? All of the above? What are you alluding to when you say that?
It's really the appearance and the yield. As far as the taste, Saladova does fairly well as far as taste. So what it seems like what happens to us is the Saladova tends to bolt. So it does this tree-like, there's like this big stalk down the center, and it'll get between 4 to 6 inches tall and all these leaves. So it takes a lot longer to harvest. And the yield, I feel like, goes down about 50%. We actually had switched varieties. We lost a big account because our primarily mix was the green sweet crisp. And we got a lot of complaints from one restaurant chain that was buying about 50 pounds a week. And we knew that, and we were trying to keep it out of it. And somehow one week, I'm not sure how it happened, just got mixed up in all the orders. We sent them the mix with that green sweet crisp, and they were like, okay, that's it. No more. Don't send us any more. So we took that out of our mix, and we went to the insights, because we had another restaurant complain about it too. They all call it for some reason. It's just the chefs and restaurant industry in Memphis they're quite picky with the salad mix. And since we're trying to get a good price for the greens, they're just very, very picky about it. We switched the green and red insights, which we feel like has not bolted near as bad as the other greens, especially with the butter. We don't even grow the butter anymore in the summertime. So that's really the biggest thing with the summer is just the yield. And now what I mean by yield is that since it bolts so fast, you just don't get those really full, dense heads as you would in the fall, winter, and spring, where it's just the head just gets bigger and bigger without that center stalk.
Are you also getting less cuts?
We only get one cut in the summertime. From really the middle of May on till the middle of September, we only get one cut per planting.
In the green sweet crisp, what didn't they like about that?
They said it was too tough, which it is more of a sturdier green. We love it. We think it's great. But for them, I guess they're really used to that more buttery, soft textured lettuce. And they just don't like that green sweet crisp for some reason.
In terms of procedural issues, it sounds like shade cloths in the works, irrigation. How do you differ your irrigation in summer to help with greens production? And then after that, can you talk about what your trials are going to be with shade cloth?
Yeah. So this has been our experience. Lettuce needs a lot of water. Now, you can water too much. And we've actually had to watch it. What we do is everything is on a timer. And so we have it to run around 3 times a day, about 15 minutes per cycle. And one of those we like to hit in the early evening. Yeah, so like around 10 o'clock. And what that does, that really cools down the bed, the soil, the plant. And then that way, during the nighttime, that whole lettuce is really getting cooled down. What we have experienced is that nighttime cooling down effect is pretty important for the lettuce from turning bitter, which is a real common problem down here. It's just lettuce being really bitter. You could have a really beautiful head of lettuce or a really nice stand of salad mix, but without those greens really cooling down, we just personally have experienced more bitterness in the greens. So we feel lots of water for short amount of times has really been helpful. But I will say that you can overwater. For instance, if you get a rain or overcast day multiple times, too much water can kill the plants, as in too much sunlight. So if it's going to rain, it's important to go to those timers and hit a 24-hour delay. Maybe you need to delay it for 2 or 3 days, depending on how much overcast there is. It's definitely not a silver bullet like this whole 3 times a day. You really do have to watch the weather. But if you're looking at 10 to 14 days of sunshine and in the mid-90s, that 3 times a day in the 24-hour period has really worked well. And we feel like the first 10 to 15 days is the most crucial point of that lettuce in the summertime to surviving. So we find that putting shade cloth over those lettuces for the first 2 weeks or so really helps those greens get really established. And I also think, backing up a little bit, if I can, I actually think we found keeping the lettuces outside of your greenhouse and putting outside in the direct sun, those transplant lettuce, really helps the hardening off process. So you're basically, it's the same process as you would do in the early spring where you want to get your tomato plants, they're in your shell pack trays, and you want to get them outside to help acclimate to the outdoor kind of cool weather. You're doing that with the lettuce greens in the summertime as well. So it just helps get them acclimated to that really intense sunlight.
A couple things I want to follow up on there. First, the shade cloth. How are you supporting it over the beds? And what density shade cloth are you using?
We use 50%. And there's a few ways. If you use little hoops, you can fasten it. If you're going to use those little wire hoops, you can fasten those on with a clothespin. Or if you're using like those bigger half-inch EMT conduit hoops, Johnny sells these little half-inch conduit clips. That's for shade cloth. So that really works well.
And you only leave that on for the 10 to 15 days of establishment?
That's right. Because at least in our experience, what we have found, if you leave it on there any longer, that we find that the heads get really spindly and they don't really fill up to a really nice solid head. It's possible, which we haven't experimented with this yet, it's possible that you could downgrade to maybe a 20 to 30% shade cloth and maybe you would have better luck. But for us, it's worked just fine, just taking it off for the last 2 weeks of its growing life.
In thinking about your irrigation, doing it 3 times a day over the summer, how would that compare to early May or September, late September when it's not as hot out? What would that look like, just to give a point of comparison?
Yeah, maybe once every 2 or 3 days. It's definitely a lot different. We use landscape fabric just because this is year 2 in trying to really get a handle on our weed pressure. And so the landscape fabric really helps with that. We also use drip tape underneath that, so sometimes you can just get away with just the drip. And this spring, we did both. We tried just overhead without the drip, and that worked just fine too. It's just whatever is your preference. But I think early spring, fall, overhead or drip is fine. And really just every 2 or 3 days it is fine.
Sorry to interrupt your episode, but it's a word from our sponsor, Paper Pot Co. Say goodbye to sandbags forever with Quick Hoops. Let's face it, poly low tunnels in general are a pain in the butt. They're hard to set up, they require several people to set up, and you need all sorts of equipment like ropes and sandbags to secure the fabric. And even then, a strong wind comes by and often takes the fabric away with the wind. You can say goodbye to all that hassle forever because Quick Hoops solve that problem. They've been used in New Zealand by farmers for over the past 20 years, and they allow one person, just one person, to set up an entire bed, including hoops and fabrics, in about 10 minutes by themselves, no sandbags or ropes required. So everything you hated about poly low tunnels in the past, whether they were made from PVC or EMT, all those negatives are gone with Quick Hoops. These have been tested in some of the windiest locations in New Zealand, being exposed to 70 plus mile per hour winds. They're made from high tensile steel, and they should last you a decade or more. That's not an estimate. That's how long some of these systems have lasted in New Zealand, where they're actually made. Be aware of cheap imitations. Get the strongest, most innovative, efficient, time-saving poly low tunnel on the market. Quick Hoops, available at paperpot.co or using the link below. Check them out and then get back into this episode on Lettuce with Ray Tyler.
In terms of establishment in the field, what's your procedure there? Say you're planting on a brand new fresh bed. How would you treat that to get the greens to take in that heat?
What we're doing is whenever we go to plant early morning, we want to plant into a really saturated bed. And we're doing that, and then as soon as we're done planting that bed of lettuce, whether it be Salanova or head lettuce, it's already well watered. Then we're installing the shade cloth on it, and then we're getting our overhead irrigation. And so what that'll happen is maybe we'll go ahead and run that overhead maybe for 30 minutes just to help watering the lettuce plants really well. And then it'll come on again later on that afternoon. We've experienced really good success with that procedure. Basically, it's just really watching for the first 2 weeks, just seeing how the lettuces are varying. Just, is it getting too much water? Is it not water enough? There'll be some days where it's just pushing 100, very humid, very just bright sun. And sometimes we'll add maybe a short water there. And then some days it's okay, they're going to get too soggy. We're starting to see some leaves are dying just because it's too wet, and we'll back it off. So really, you just got to really watch it for the first 2 weeks. And then after that 2 weeks, it's almost impossible to kill the lettuce after that.
Thinking on the flip side of that, or the opposite end of all this, when it comes time to harvest, how are you harvesting this time of year when it's hot and you want to make sure that the product now you've put all this effort into getting established and growing in the heat stays saleable and in good condition so it ultimately makes it to the customer?
And that's really important to touch on. For us, all lettuce must be harvested out of the field by 8 a.m. And what we have found is that for us, it's not just the way the lettuce looks, but just in the early mornings, we found that the lettuce, the Salanova and head lettuce they're very dense, they're very crisp. So when you harvest at that really crisp, fresh stage, it's much, much easier to maintain that freshness. Basically, from the time you process it, as long as it goes right to the cooler, to the time it gets into your restaurant or grocery store or farmer's markets, wherever that's going. We've had folks tell us that lettuce has lasted 3 weeks in the summertime. And we've also have harvested head lettuce before in the afternoon when it's wilted, and we think, we'll just put it in really cold water and it'll come back to life. And it does that, but we just feel like the quality, the nutrients are just not there. And so it just doesn't last near as long. And we've noticed if we harvest lettuce early mornings on Friday and it goes to the Saturday market, that it'll just look great at the farmer's market out in the basket. But if you are taking a lettuce that was harvested in the afternoon, we feel like it just does not last near as long on the farmer's market table. I definitely feel like you can do everything right. You can get your lettuce germination, put them in the walk-in cooler for 48 hours. You can get that all right. You can get your hardening off right, your bed. You can have a beautiful head of lettuce, but if you harvest that in the afternoon, you're going to have a really tough time getting that lettuce to last long into whatever restaurant, grocery store that you wanted to go into. It's all of it. You not only want to have a product that looks good, but it needs to last as long as possible.
So you're cutting, going into the walk-in. When do you time that relative to when you'd wash it and pack it? Is it same day? Do you do it the day before? Do you have a limit on how much you want to cut it prior to when it would go into packing? And if you do introduce water outside of the wash, when is that happening, or is it only in the first wash?
Most of the time, we're harvesting lettuce the day before we wash, because basically every day we need to be harvesting. So if we know we have a big harvest day, so I'll give you a practical example. Let's just say Friday's going to be that's our big wash harvest day for the markets, and then but we know we have a lot of head lettuce to do, a lot of salad mix, and a lot of other things. Say we have a bunch of collards and kale that needs to be out of the field 2x8, then we will harvest 200 head of head lettuce on Thursday morning. So as long as that gets harvested before 8 or so, that goes right to the walk-in cooler, and that's great. And then the next day, if that needs to get washed, then we can do that in our processing shed. And our processing shed has an AC unit in there, so it stays within the 70-degree range. Where we're washing and packing stays cool as well. Once it comes out of the cooler, it may be exposed. It goes into a wash tub. It gets drip dried, or maybe it gets spun. And that whole process is relatively cool. And then as soon as that's done, it gets put back in the tote and right back into the walk-in cooler. So it's always staying cold.
And hearing this, I'm thinking your preferred variety is Salanova. Do you have any comments on varieties that you really like or that just haven't worked well for you, or is it just Salanova?
In the past, our main lettuce was head lettuce. And Salanova for us hasn't really been the greatest performer in the summertime. We will grow it for our really high-end clients who are willing to pay the money for it, but since we're getting literally half the yield, we're not completely sold. Or maybe it's just we haven't completely found what really works for us in the South. But our favorite is like Cherokee and Muir head lettuce, because it just holds so well in the field. It's very dense. It looks beautiful. In August, when it's just roasting and the ground is just on fire. So for us, those two varieties have really dependable. And that's paid our bills in August. Salanova, it's okay, but what it does for us is it keeps our clients. So everybody in the South has lettuce and salad mix in October, November, December, and the same in April, May, early June, but they don't have it in the dead of summer or the dead of winter. So we do it on those two times just because it just keeps our clients. So what we have found is that salad mix does well. So what we've been doing recently is we've been actually mixing salad mix with the Salanova, just where the salad mix is a much cheaper seed, and we actually almost get the same yield from the salad mix as we do Salanova. It also helps because the salad mix that we're using has more of that buttery texture, which I think some of our chefs like. In the fall, winter, and spring, you can use the red and green butter for that nice buttering. But in the summertime, I have not figured out how to grow without it just bolting too fast. So for us, we've just substituted a natural salad mix, which is a much cheaper seed. We're getting the same yield per bed as we are the Salanova in the summertime. And so that's what we're turning, that's basically what we've changed our lettuce production to. So far it's working. We've switched to the paper pot, so we're pretty excited to see how that's going to work out as well this summer. We're always experimenting with different lettuce varieties and different methods to really try to find the best way to have greens all summer long. Because if a small farm in the South can really have summer salad you can really, really get your foot in your local food economy door with being the salad king. And it can really help pay the bills at a time of year that really cash can be hard to come by because it's just so hot.
Thinking of that, where do you think you are on that pathway, that yellow brick road to being the salad king? Are you partially there? Are you still trying to figure it out?
I think it depends who you ask. So if you ask me, I would say I'm not completely satisfied with where we're at. I think we have a long ways to go. If you were to ask all the farmers and restaurants in the area, they would all say that I've got it down. But I think that's just because they see that we're in all these restaurants and we're in grocery stores year round. In my book, I think we have a ways to go. We've definitely have the reputation in the Mid-South for being the salad farm, which I think is great. We've definitely been working for that, but there's still a ways to go. As in, like this past last week, I think we had a little dip in our yield, which I should have double planted to help. I knew it was coming. I thought it was going to be a little bit later, but I missed it by about 2 weeks. Yeah, it's just kind of those things of learning of the different varieties and how they're working, and yeah, it really keeps you on your toes. But we're having a great time. We're having a great time, and it's a goal that we want to have salad 50 weeks a year, as much as our local clients will want. We want to supply just as much as people will buy. So that's definitely the end goal that I have.